The sky over New York City had not been truly blue for 10 years. It was a textured ceiling of matte silver and gunmetal gray, composed of the interlocking hulls of the Galactic Alliance peacekeeping fleet. They hovered in low orbit, massive enough to block the sun and alter the tides. A constant reminder that humanity was no longer the apex predator of its own planet. The giant screens plastered on the sides of the megacities beamed down images of smiling humans shaking hands with tall, slender aliens, accompanied by the scrolling slogan, "Peace through cooperation, unity through sacrifice," down in the streets. The rain tasted like copper and ozone. The resentment among the human population was not a roar, but a simmering hum, like a high-voltage wire waiting to snap. Jace Reynolds sat in the bowels of the consolidated data center, bathed in the sickly green light of his workstation. He was 28 years old, with messy brown hair that defied all attempts at professional styling and a permanent shadow of exhaustion under his eyes. His official job title was Junior Linguistic Analyst, Class 4. It sounded impressive to his mother, whom he had not spoken to in 6 months because he could not afford the long-distance credits to call the chaotic exclusion zone of Florida. To everyone else, including himself, he was the coffee fetcher of the galaxy. He tapped his finger against the desk, staring at a translation query regarding the import taxes on Rigelian swamp root. 600 credits for rent due in 2 days. Jace muttered to the empty cubicle. And I am translating the galactic equivalent of a grocery receipt. He was tired. It was 3 in the morning, and the only other people on the floor were the cleaning drones humming softly as they scrubbed the synthetic carpet. Jace rubbed his temples. He had taken this job for the security clearance and the paycheck, but the clearance was low, and the paycheck was already gone before it hit his account. A priority flag blinked on his secondary monitor. It was an encryption error. A packet of data from the upper-tier diplomatic server had been routed to his terminal by mistake, likely a routing algorithm hiccup caused by the solar flares reported earlier that week. The file name was bland. Stability Assessment, Sector North America, Projection 99. Probably just more propaganda budget details. Jace sighed. He keyed in his analyst override, expecting the system to deny him. Instead, the file blossomed open. It was not a budget. Jace leaned in, his eyes scanning the dense columns of alien syntax and their automated English translations. It was a joint directive between the Earth Interim Council and the Galactic Alliance Security Bureau. The language was cold, detached, and horrifying. Subject: civil unrest dampening. Method: controlled localized trauma. Target: Sector 7, Greater Chicago Metropolitan Zone. Projected casualties: 2,400,000. Status: acceptable. Necessary for long-term political stabilization. The air left Jace's lungs. They were not talking about a natural disaster. They were talking about a staged event, a culling. The document detailed a plan to disable the atmospheric shields over Chicago, blaming it on human terrorists, and allowing a solar radiation burst to incinerate the city center. The Alliance would then swoop in as saviors, imposing martial law to protect the rest of the populace. Acceptable casualties, Jace whispered, the words tasting like ash. His hand shook as he reached for his personal interface. He knew the surveillance algorithms monitored keystrokes, but he also knew they were lazy about low-level analysts at 3 in the morning. He initiated a screen capture. He had to get this to Moth. Moth was a rumor, a digital ghost he had met in the dark corners of the encrypted net, a hacktivist who collected the Alliance's dirty laundry. Jace encrypted the image file and attached it to a dummy invoice for office supplies. He hit send. The moment the data packet left his terminal, the room turned red. A klaxon did not blare. The Alliance did not do loud noises. Instead, a pressure wave of silence slammed into the room, sucking out the ambient hum of the ventilation. His monitor flashed a single pulsing glyph. Violation. "Oh no," Jace said, pushing his chair back. "No, no, no!" The elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open with a hiss. They did not send human security guards with stun batons. Two spheres of matte black metal, each the size of a beach ball, floated into the room. Anti-gravity drives hummed just below the range of human hearing, vibrating in Jace's molars. Security drones. Citizen Reynolds, a synthesized voice spoke from the air itself. "Remain stationary. You are being detained for high-level information corruption." Jace raised his hands, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "I was just trying to forward a receipt. The system glitched." The drones did not care about his excuses. Red laser grids swept over his body, locking his limbs in a field of static electricity that made his muscles seize. He could not run. He could barely breathe. "Processing," the voice said. "Transferring custody to Special Division, Elith jurisdiction." The blood drained from Jace's face. If the humans arrested him, he would get a lawyer and a show trial. If the Elith took him, he might never be seen again. The Elith were the eyes of the Alliance, the high-caste telepaths who served as judges and interrogators. "Wait!" Jace gasped as the drones pushed him forward with invisible hands. "I have rights. I want to see a union rep." The drones ignored him, floating him out of the office and toward a destiny that would likely end in a quiet room and a fried brain. They did not take him to the local precinct. A sleek, windowless shuttle transported him vertically, rising above the smog of the city and docking with one of the lower spires of a hovering Alliance frigate. Jace had spent his whole life looking up at these ships, but he had never been inside one. The architecture was unnerving. There were no sharp angles, only flowing organic curves made of a material that felt warm to the touch. The light did not come from fixtures but emanated from the walls themselves. A soft, pulsating amber that made Jace feel like he was inside the belly of a bioluminescent whale. He was deposited in a room that contained only 2 chairs and a table that looked like it was grown from white coral. The door dissolved into the wall behind him, leaving him trapped. "Okay, Jace," he whispered to himself, pacing the small space. "You think you saw a file. You sent half of it to a cyber terrorist. You are currently floating 5,000 feet above Manhattan in an alien spaceship. On the scale of bad Tuesdays, this is an 11. He was trying to use humor to keep the panic at bay, but his hands were trembling. He knew the rumors about Elith interrogations. They did not beat you. They did not drug you. They just looked at you. And when they were done, you were hollow. A section of the far wall shimmered and parted. She walked in, and for a second, Jace forgot to be afraid. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with a skeletal structure that was longer and more elegant than a human's. Her skin was the color of moonlight on water, a pale iridescent blue that seemed to shift and ripple with her movements. Intricate markings, darker swirls like tattoos made of ink and shadow, traced lines down her neck and disappeared beneath the high collar of her charcoal gray uniform. But it was her eyes that stole the breath from his lungs. They had no whites and no pupils. They were pools of liquid starlight, swirling with galaxies of violet and silver. To look into them was to feel instantly small, as if the entire universe were staring back. She carried no weapon. She did not need one. She moved to the table with a fluidity that made Jace feel clumsy and heavy. She sat down and gestured for him to do the same. "Sit, Jace Reynolds," she said. Her voice was melodic, carrying a harmonic undertone that vibrated in his chest. It was a beautiful voice, but tired. Jace sat, gripping the edges of the coral table. Am I allowed to ask who you are, or is that classified too? I am High Inquisitor Sarai, she said. Her face was impassive, but there was a tightness around her mouth, a subtle tension that suggested she had done this too many times. And you are in a great deal of trouble. I figured that part out when the floating death balls arrested me, Jace said. His mouth ran faster when he was nervous. Is this the part where you probe my brain? Because I should warn you, it is mostly 80% song lyrics and worry about my credit score. Sarai tilted her head, the starlight in her eyes shifting. Humor is a common defense mechanism among your species. It rarely works here. Worth a shot, Jace muttered. We detected an unauthorized decryption, Sarai said, folding her long, slender fingers on the table. You viewed a document well above your clearance. We need to know who you sent it to, and how much you understood. I didn't understand any of it, Jace lied. It looked like gibberish. I thought it was a corrupt file. Sarai sighed, a very human sound that seemed out of place coming from such an ethereal creature. Please do not lie to me, Jace. It is exhausting for both of us. My species, the Elith, perceives the resonance of truth. Words are irrelevant. Then why ask? Because protocol demands a verbal record, she said. She leaned forward, and the light in the room seemed to dim, focusing entirely on her. I will look into your eyes. You will not be harmed, unless you choose to resist. The harder you fight to hide, the more painful the extraction will be. Jace swallowed hard. The universe's most awkward staring contest. Great. Sarai did not smile. Look at me. He looked. It was not like looking at a person, and it was like falling off a cliff. The moment their gazes locked, the room dissolved. Jace felt a physical sensation of vertigo, as if gravity had rotated 90 degrees. He was falling sideways, tumbling through a kaleidoscope of his own memories. He saw his childhood bedroom in Ohio, the peeling wallpaper. He felt the cold rain on his face the day his father left. He smelled the stale coffee of the office. He felt the crushing weight of his debt, the loneliness of his empty apartment, the biting anger he felt every time he saw a propaganda poster. He is angry. A voice echoed in his mind. It was her voice, but it was inside his head. He is lonely. He uses laughter as a shield. Jace gasped, trying to pull away, but he was paralyzed. The connection was absolute. He felt her presence sifting through his mind like fingers running through water. She found the moment of the breach. She saw the file. She saw the horror he felt when he read the casualty numbers. 2 million dead, he thought, projecting the memory at her with all the fury he could muster. You are going to kill them. He felt Sarai flinch. For the first time, the flow of information reversed. The barrier between observer and observed thinned and then shattered. Jace was suddenly seeing her. He saw a cold white room where she was trained as a child, forced to stare at prisoners until they broke. He felt the heavy, suffocating weight of the Alliance's expectations. He felt her exhaustion, her deep, secret revulsion at being used as a tool of oppression. She did not want to do this. She was tired of stealing secrets. And then, deeper. She saw him looking at her right now. She saw the fear. Yes, but underneath the fear, she saw a blazing, unfiltered attraction. She saw that he thought she was the most terrifyingly beautiful thing he had ever seen. She felt his desire raw and unguarded, a heat that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the woman sitting across from him. The intimacy of it was shocking. It was more naked than if they had both stripped off their clothes. He sees me, Sarai thought, and Jace heard her surprise like a bell ringing in the dark. He does not just see the Inquisitor. He sees the doubt. Jace saw the classified file through her eyes now. He saw the annotations he had missed. The civil disturbance was scheduled for 3 weeks from today. The orbital strike was not just a threat. The weapons were already primed, and he saw that Sarai knew it was wrong. The intensity of the link spiked. It was too much. Fear, desire, guilt, and truth swirling into a vortex that threatened to consume them both. Jace felt a desperate, insane urge to reach out and grab her hand, to anchor himself in the storm. Sarai felt that urge, and she felt her own answering spark, a dangerous curiosity, a longing for connection that she had suppressed for decades. She gasped and ripped her gaze away. The connection broke with a physical snap. Jace fell back against his chair, gasping for air, sweat beading on his forehead. Sarai recoiled as if she had been burned, her luminous skin flushing a deep, violet hue. The room was silent, save for the ragged sound of their breathing. Jace gripped the table, his knuckles white. He stared at the alien woman, his heart thundering against his ribs. The alien woman looked into my eyes and knew everything. What happens next is even more dangerous. "You saw it," Jace whispered, his voice shaking. "You saw what I did, and I saw that you don't want to kill those people." Sarai stood up, turning her back to him. Her hands were trembling. She clasped them behind her back to hide the tremor. She was calculating. The logic of her training screamed at her to flag him as a high-level threat. He knew too much. He had seen inside an inquisitor's mind. Protocol dictated immediate containment and memory erasure. But if she reported the truth, Jace Reynolds would cease to exist. He would be taken to the lower levels, and his mind would be wiped blank. The file would remain secret. The strike on Chicago would proceed. She looked at the wall, seeing the reflection of his terrified, defiant face. She remembered the warmth of his attraction, the honesty of his anger. He was reckless, foolish, and entirely transparent. "It was a glitch," Sarai said. Her voice was brittle. Jace blinked, confused. "What?" Sarai turned back to face him. Her face was a mask of cold porcelain, but her eyes were pleading. "I am entering my report now. The security drone malfunctioned. You accidentally accessed a corrupted data fragment that appeared to be classified but was, in fact, random noise. You saw nothing of consequence." She tapped a sequence of commands into the holographic interface floating above the table. The red light in the room turned back to soft amber. "You are falsifying the report," Jace said, stunned. "Why?" "Because if I tell the truth, you die," Sarai said softly. She walked toward the door, which dissolved to reveal the corridor. "And because I am tired of the math, Jace Reynolds." She stepped close to him, looming tall and terrifyingly graceful. She leaned down, her voice a whisper that did not travel to the recording devices in the walls. "Forget what you found. Go back to your coffee and your invoices. Do not speak of this to anyone. This is the last mercy I can offer." "Sarai," he said, testing her name. "Go," she commanded, the authority slamming back into her tone like a steel door. 2 security drones drifted in to escort him out. Jace looked back at her one last time. She was standing perfectly still, a statue of moonlight and regret, watching him leave. The transition back to the human world was jarring. One moment he was in the silent, glowing spire. The next, he was dumped on the street corner 2 blocks from his apartment, the rain soaking through his shirt in seconds. His personal interface buzzed. A notification from work. Account suspended pending psychological evaluation. Mandatory paid leave initiated. They had cleared him, just as she said. He was free. Jace walked up the 5 flights of stairs to his apartment. It was a cramped, shoebox-sized unit that smelled of old takeout and mildew. He locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. then the manual chain, then the heavy steel bar he had installed himself. He went to the window and peered through the blinds, hovering just outside the fire escape, obscured by the rain and the shadows, was a small black sphere, a drone. A chill went down Jace's spine. Sarai had saved him from the official arrest, from the immediate erasure, but she had not made him invisible. The Alliance Security Bureau was efficient. If an inquisitor let a suspect go with a slap on the wrist, the Bureau would watch that suspect to see if the inquisitor had made a mistake. Or perhaps Sarai herself was watching him. Jace paced his small living room. He thought about the file. Target Sector 7, that was millions of families. He thought about Sarai's eyes, the way she had looked at him with that terrifying mixture of power and vulnerability. She was trapped in the machine just as much as he was. He could not just go back to fetching coffee. He knew the date. He knew the plan. And now, he knew that the monsters in the ships above were not all monsters. Some of them were just broken. He sat down at his personal terminal, a jury-rigged system built from scavenged parts. He pulled up the encrypted channel he used to talk to Moth. User, Void Walker, Jace status, active. He typed quickly, his fingers flying across the keys. Jace, it is worse than we thought. I was taken. I was questioned. A response came within seconds. Moth, did you talk? Jace, no. But she saw inside my head. She let me go. But there is a drone outside my window. They are watching. Moth, if they released you, it is a trap, or a test. You are burned. Jace, if you stay there, you are dead within 48 hours. Jace looked around his apartment. The pile of unwashed laundry. The poster of a pre-invasion rock band on the wall. The half-empty bottle of synthetic whiskey on the counter. It wasn't much of a life, but it was his. Jace, the file says they are going to burn Chicago in 3 weeks to justify a crackdown. I can't just sit here. Moth, then don't. I am sending you coordinates. Pack a bag, leave the phone. If you want answers, come. Jace memorized the numbers that flashed on the screen. A location deep in the Undercity. The lawless zones where the alien sensors struggled to penetrate the layers of old subway tunnels and lead-lined basements. He grabbed a backpack. He threw in a change of clothes, a flashlight, his hard drive, and the physical cache he had hidden in a hollowed-out book. He pulled his hood up. He paused at the door, looking back at the window. The drone was still there, a mechanical vulture waiting for him to rot. Thank you, Sarai, he whispered into the darkness. But I think we both know I can't forget. He slipped out the back exit, down the fire escape, and into the rainy shadows of the alleyway. Above him, the alien ships painted the night sky with their silent, oppressive weight. Somewhere in one of those towers, a woman who knew everything about him had just broken all her rules to save his life, and Jace had a feeling that he was going to make her regret it. He began to run. High Inquisitor Sarai sat in the meditative silence of her personal quarters aboard the flagship Ethelgard. The walls here were not the harsh metal of human construction, but a living, breathing silicate that pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent rhythm, mimicking the heartbeat of her homeworld. She was not meditating. She was staring at a floating holographic glyph that burned a harsh crimson against the soothing blue of her room. Notification of variance, the message read. Subject, interrogation, 9 Alpha. Analyst note, anomalous emotional spikes detected in Inquisitor neuropatterns. Suggest immediate recalibration of suppression dampers. Status, probationary monitor. Sarai swiped her hand through the air, scattering the light. They knew. The central AI that monitored all Elith neural activity had tasted the spike of adrenaline and the confusing wash of heat she had felt when she looked into Jace Reynolds' mind. It had not seen the specific images. Her rank protected her from total surveillance, but it knew she had felt something other than professional detachment. She should be terrified. A probationary status was one step away from reconditioning, a process that scrubbed the personality clean and left only a dutiful husk. Instead, she felt a strange, vibrating defiance. She walked to the viewport, below. The earth was a marble of blue and white, shrouded in the gray smog of industry and the darker shadows of the Alliance fleet. She had come here 60 years ago, young and fervent, believing the Alliance's promise. Truth brings order. Order brings peace. But the truth she saw daily was a commodity. She extracted it from dissidents, from thieves, from terrified politicians. And then she watched her superiors edit it, twist it, and weaponize it. She activated her private archive. A small, unauthorized file hovered into existence. It was not part of the official record. It was a memory fragment she had stolen from Jace before severing the link. It was not the classified file. It was a memory of him sitting on a rusted fire escape, sharing a sandwich with a stray cat. He was hungry. She could feel the gnawing emptiness in his stomach, but he tore off a piece of the meat and gave it to the animal. He laughed as the cat hissed at him, a lonely, genuine sound that bounced off the brick walls. Stupid, Sarai thought, though the thought lacked its usual bite. He is starving and alone, yet he shares what little he has. He was chaotic. His mind was a mess of insecurities, bad jokes, and impulsive decisions. He was everything an Elith was trained to despise. And yet, when she touched his mind, she had felt a warmth that her cold, sterile life had never offered. He had seen her, not the Inquisitor, not the monster, but her, and his first instinct had been attraction, not revulsion. "Computer," she said, her voice steady. "Locate Jace Reynolds. Subject is moving through Sector 4, the room replied. The Undercity. Current status? Alliance security sweep scheduled for Sector 4 in 40 minutes. Target is high probability for collateral damage. Sarai stiffened. They were not just watching him. They were flushing him out. Prepare my transport, she commanded, grabbing her cloak. And activate the cloaking interface. I am conducting a field observation. Sector 4 was less a district and more a festering wound in the side of the megacity, patched over with neon tape and scrap metal. Here, the shiny chrome of the Alliance presence gave way to the grime of human survival. The air smelled of frying oil, ozone, and unwashed bodies. Jace Reynolds pulled his hood lower, trying to blend into the crowd of hawkers, smugglers, and cyber-enhanced drifters. He had been walking for 2 hours following the coordinates Moth had sent him, and his stomach was making sounds that rivaled the low-flying hover cars. He stopped in front of a street vendor selling something that hissed on a grill. The vendor was a multi-limbed creature from the Rigel system, wearing a grease-stained apron. "What is that?" Jace asked, pointing at a skewer of fluorescent blue meat. "Grack root," the vendor grunted, the translation collar around its neck buzzing. 5 credits, good for stamina, bad for teeth. "I will take one," Jace said, handing over a crumpled credit chip. "I don't have much stamina or good teeth left anyway." He took a bite and immediately regretted every life choice that had led him to this moment. It tasted like spicy rubber soaked in vinegar. Tears welled in his eyes, but he forced himself to swallow. "Delicious," he wheezed, giving the vendor a thumbs up. "Tastes like regret." He checked his wrist comp. The coordinates pointed to a basement level beneath a defunct arcade. He navigated through the press of bodies, dodging a group of teenagers with glowing cybernetic implants who eyed his backpack with predatory interest. He found the door. It was marked out of order and plastered with holographic warnings about radiation leaks. Jace tapped the code Moth had given him. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 fast taps. The door hissed open. The room inside was a chaotic nest of cables, monitors, and cooling fans. The heat was intense, and the hum of servers drowned out the street noise above. Sitting in the center of the web was a figure in a heavy coat. Their back to him. "You are late," a voice said. It was female, digitized and distorted. "I stopped for lunch," Jace said, closing the door. It was a tactical error. "Are you Moth?" The chair spun around. Moth was a young woman, perhaps 20, with half of her head shaved. The other half was covered by a metallic plate that replaced her left eye and ear with a complex sensor array. Her human eye was brown and sharp. The cybernetic one was a glowing red aperture that zoomed in and out as it focused on him. "You look like a stiff," Moth said, looking him up and down. "Corporate cut trousers, shoes that have never seen real mud. You are the whistleblower?" "I am the guy who accidentally read the wrong email," Jace corrected. "And I would love to be a stiff again. Being a fugitive involves too much cardio." Moth snorted, turning back to her screens. "Come look at this. You sent me a fragment of the header. I spent the last 6 hours cross-referencing it with deep web chatter." Jace leaned over her shoulder. On the screen was a map of the city, overlaid with complex geometric patterns. "The directive you saw," Moth explained, her fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. "It is not just a military order. It is a psychological experiment. The Alliance Security Bureau has been running simulations for months. They need to know exactly how much trauma the human population can absorb before we break completely." She tapped a key, and a familiar face appeared on the screen. Jace froze. It was Sarai. "This is the division responsible," Moth said, pointing at Sarai's image. "Psyops and interrogation. They use telepaths to map human emotional responses. Every time that woman looks into someone's eyes, she is feeding data into an algorithm that predicts how to control us. She is not just a cop, Jace. She is the architect of the cage." Jace stared at the image. Sarai looked colder in the official file photo, her markings stark against her pale skin. "She let me go," Jace said quietly. "She saw the file in my head, and she lied to her superiors to get me out." Moth spun around, her red eye whirring. "An Alith lied? That is impossible. They are biologically incapable of deception. It causes them physical pain." "She did it," Jace insisted. I felt it. She was scared, not of me, of what she was doing." "Or she tagged you," Moth said cynically. "Maybe she let you go so you would lead her straight to people like me. Did you check yourself for trackers?" Jace started, then stopped. A boom shook the ceiling, dusting them with plaster. "They are here," Moth said, her voice losing its sarcasm. She grabbed a heavy bag from under the desk. "Security sweep. They are not looking for you specifically. They are scrubbing the whole sector. We have to move." Sarai watched from the shadows of a ventilation duct 20 feet above the alley. Her cloaking field rendered her invisible to the naked eye and thermal sensors, bending the light around her form. She saw Jace and the cyborg girl burst out of the arcade's rear exit. Jace was stumbling, clutching his backpack, his face pale. He looked terrified, clumsy, and painfully human. "He is terrible at this," Sarai thought, a flicker of amusement cutting through her tension. "He runs like a man who has spent his life sitting in a chair." A squad of Alliance peacekeepers turned the corner. They were hulking figures in riot armor, flanked by the floating black spheres of combat drones. Halt! The lead officer amplified, his voice booming down the alley. Identify! Moth drew a weapon, a modified EMP pistol, but she was too slow. A drone fired a suppression pulse. Moth convulsed and collapsed, her cybernetics shorting out in a shower of sparks. Jace skidded to a stop. He looked at Moth, then at the soldiers. He raised his hands, shaking. Don't shoot, Jace yelled. She is diabetic. She needs insulin. Sarai watched him lie. It was a terrible lie. His heart rate was visible to her even from this distance, a frantic drumbeat in his throat. Detain them, the officer commanded. Scan for contraband. 2 drones floated forward, their tasers charging with a high-pitched whine. Jace backed up against the brick wall, shielding the unconscious Moth with his body. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the pain. Sarai made her choice. She did not think about the regulations or the rank she would lose. She thought about the sandwich and the cat. She dropped from the ventilation duct. She deactivated her cloak as she landed, appearing between Jace and the drones in a sudden explosion of displacement air. Her long coat swirled around her, and her eyes flared with psychic pressure. The soldiers flinched, recognizing the uniform of a High Inquisitor. Stand down, Sarai commanded. She did not shout. She projected the order directly into their minds. The lead officer hesitated. Ma'am, we are conducting a sector sweep. These subjects are under my jurisdiction, Sarai said. She raised a hand. The 2 drones hovering near Jace suddenly dipped, their anti-gravity drives disrupted by a precise telekinetic pulse. They clattered to the ground, sparking. You are disrupting an ongoing investigation, the officer argued, stepping forward. Sarai moved. It was not a fight. It was a dance. She flowed past the officer's outstretched arm, grabbing his wrist and using his own momentum to spin him into the wall. She did not strike him, she simply touched his temple with 2 fingers. The officer's eyes rolled back, and he slumped to the ground, instantly asleep. The other soldiers raised their rifles. Sarai extended both hands, palms out. A wave of kinetic force, visible as a distortion in the air, slammed into them. It pushed them back 10 feet, knocking the wind out of them but breaking no bones. Run, Sarai said, not looking back at Jace. Jace stood there, his mouth open. You just Jedi flipped that guy. I said run, Sarai snapped, her composure cracking. She grabbed Jace by the collar of his jacket and hauled him upright. She gestured at Moth's unconscious form. Pick her up, now. Jace scrambled to obey, hoisting the smaller woman over his shoulder. Sarai led them, not away from the soldiers, but toward a solid brick wall at the end of the alley. She placed her palm on the brick. A hidden panel slid open, an old smuggler's route she had mapped years ago during a raid. They vanished into the dark just as the rest of the squad rounded the corner. The safe house was a windowless shipping container buried beneath a pile of scrap metal in a salvage yard. It was cramped, smelling of rust and Moth's ozone-scented blood. Moth was awake now, sitting on a crate and rebooting her optical systems. She held an ice pack to her head and glared at Sarai with her one good eye. Sarai stood by the door, arms crossed, radiating a light that was too bright for the dingy room. She looked out of place, like a diamond in a trash heap. You are one of them, Moth spat, pointing a shaky finger at Sarai. I saw your face on the command directive. You built the trauma models. I gathered the data, Sarai said coolly. I did not choose how it was used. That is the Nazi defense, Jace said. He was pacing the small floor space, adrenaline making him jittery. I just followed orders. I just read the minds. You knew, Sarai. You knew what they were doing. I knew they were maintaining order. Sarai shot back, her voice rising. Do you know what this planet was like before we arrived? You were poisoning your atmosphere, warring over resources, letting millions starve while the rich built bunkers. We stopped the wars. We cleaned the air. And the price is just nuking a city every now and then? Jace challenged. He stopped pacing and stood right in front of her. He was a foot shorter than her, frail by comparison, but he was not backing down. If you can see everything, Sarai, how can you pretend not to see the evil in that? How do you sleep? Sarai looked down at him. She could crush his mind with a thought. She could paralyze him and walk away. But his eyes were burning with that same stubborn, reckless honesty she had seen in the interrogation room. I don't sleep, Sarai whispered. Not well. The anger drained out of Jace. He saw the crack in her armor. Why did you save us? He asked softly. Because you were right, she said. In the interrogation, you saw my doubt, and because... She hesitated, looking at her hands. Because I am tired of knowing the truth and speaking lies. Great, Moth muttered from the crate. The space cop has a conscience. We are still wanted fugitives. What is the plan? The directive you found, Sarai said, turning to Moth. It is a copy, a localized cache. If we leak it, the Alliance will claim it is a forgery created by terrorists. They will use the leak as the excuse to accelerate the strike on Chicago. So we are screwed, Jace said. No, Sarai said. We need the original source file, the one signed by the High Council. It contains the cryptographic DNA of the Alliance leadership. It cannot be faked, and it cannot be denied. And where is that? Moth asked. Orbital Station Theta, Sarai said. The central data spire. Jace laughed, a high, hysterical sound. Oh, sure, let's just pop up to space. I will just flap my arms really hard. I have a shuttle, Sarai said. And I have clearance codes, but I cannot access the spire alone. It requires a manual interface hack, which, she gestured to Moth, is your specialty, and it requires a distraction. She looked at Jace. I am the distraction. Jace pointed at himself. My superpower is anxiety and bad pun. Your superpower, Sarai said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips, is that you are unexpectedly loud when you are panicked. We can use that. This is suicide, Moth said, but she was already checking her gear. I'm in. Jace? Sarai asked. Jace looked at her. He looked at the alien markings on her face, the terrifying depth of her eyes. He realized, with a jolt of horror, that he wanted to say yes not because of Chicago, but because he didn't want her to go without him. I am in, he said. But if I die, I am haunting you. It will be very annoying. I have no doubt, Sarai said. She stepped closer to him. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Jace, she said quietly, you are trusting me, but you still fear me. I can feel it. It is hard not to fear someone who can read my browser history. Jace tried to joke, but his voice cracked. I want to show you, she said. Not a taking, a giving. I want you to see what I see, to know who I am. So you know I am not the enemy. She held out her hand. May I? Jace stared at her long, slender fingers. He remembered the feeling of falling sideways. He remembered the terror. But he also remembered the connection. He nodded. Okay. He took her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth. Look at me, she whispered. He looked. This time, there was no vertigo. It was like stepping into a warm, still pool of water. He was inside her mind, but he wasn't drowning. He felt a profound, aching silence. He saw a child, thin and blue, sitting in a white room, told she must not cry because emotion clouds the vision. He felt the weight of 1,000 secrets, the burden of knowing every lie her commanders told. He felt her loneliness. It was a vast, hollow canyon in her chest. She had never been touched, truly touched by someone who didn't want something from her. And then, he felt her perception of him. He saw himself through her eyes. He didn't see a loser or a coffee fetcher. He saw a man who was vibrant, blazing with color in a gray world. She admired his courage. She felt a protective instinct wrapping around him like wings. And underneath the protection, he felt a hum of desire. It was tentative, shy, terrified of rejection. She wanted to be close to him. She wanted to know what it was like to be looked at with kindness. The intimacy was overwhelming. Jace gasped, his breath hitching. He squeezed her hand. Sarai felt his reaction. She felt his shock, and then his softening. He wasn't pulling away. He was projecting a feeling of safety. He wanted to be the shield for her. They stood there, locked in the silent communion, the air between them charged with static. The boundaries of their bodies felt blurry. Jace found himself leaning in, drawn by the gravity of her presence. Sarai's eyes widened, the colors swirling faster. "Hey!" "It is..." Moth's voice shattered the moment like a hammer on glass. "Are you two going to stare each other into a relationship? Or are we planning a heist?" The link snapped. Jace jumped back, his face burning hot. Sarai turned away quickly, pretending to adjust her coat, but the bioluminescent markings on her neck were pulsing a bright, flustered violet. "Right," Jace stammered. "Heist, space, let's do that." "Focus," Sarai said, her voice unusually breathless. "We have 6 hours before the shuttle departs." The preparation was a blur of forged documents and hasty disguises. Sarai programmed a new identity for Jace, Protocol Assistant 3rd Class. "You must walk behind me," Sarai instructed as she adjusted the collar of the stiff formal tunic she had stolen for him. "Head down, hands clasped. Do not speak unless spoken to." "So, my normal job," Jace said. "Got it." "And stop looking at my throat," Sarai said, not looking up from her datapad. "I wasn't. You were wondering if the markings change texture when I am angry," she said. "They do. They become rough. Now stand still." She reached out to straighten his collar. Her knuckles brushed the skin of his neck. Both of them froze. The memory of the mind link washed over them, the shared loneliness, the shared heat. Sarai pulled her hand back slowly. "We must be professional, Jace. The station scans for physiological stress. If your heart rate spikes every time I touch you, we will be arrested." "Then don't touch me," Jace said, his voice tight. "I will try," she said. The promise hung in the air, heavy and complicated. They made it to the shuttle port with minutes to spare. Moth was already on board, concealed in a cargo crate marked medical supplies. Sarai presented her credentials to the automated gatekeeper. "High Inquisitor," the machine droned. "Clearance accepted. Proceed." They walked up the ramp into the belly of the transport. The shuttle was sleek, smelling of recycled air and ozone. As the engines hummed to life, Jace found a viewport. He watched the ground fall away. New York City became a grid of lights, then a smear of gray, then a distant patch on a blue curve. He had never left Earth. He had never expected to. "Regretting it?" Sarai asked, coming to stand beside him. She was careful to keep a respectful distance, but he could feel the warmth of her body. "I am terrified," Jace admitted. He looked at her reflection in the glass. "I am putting my life and the future of my entire species in the hands of a woman who knows every embarrassing thing I have ever done. You know I slept with a nightlight until I was 20. 19, Sarai corrected gently. And it was because you were afraid of the dark. See? This is what I mean. No secrets. Sarai looked out at the stars, the starlight in her eyes merging with the view outside. There are still secrets, Jace, she said softly. You know my memories. You know my fears, but you do not know everything. What don't I know? She turned to him, and for a second, the mask of the Inquisitor dropped completely. She looked young and reckless and alive. You don't know what I am willing to destroy to keep you safe, she said. It was a promise, and it was a threat, and it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to him. Attention passengers, the pilot's voice announced. Preparing for orbital insertion. Gravity will shift in 5 seconds. Jace grabbed the handrail as the shuttle lurched. He looked at Sarai, and he realized that the danger of the mission was nothing compared to the danger of standing next to her. Show me, he said. Soon. Sarai answered. The shuttle blasted forward, leaving the atmosphere behind, carrying a thief, a spy, and a traitor toward the stars. Orbital Station Theta did not just float in the void. It sprawled like a mechanical reef grown over centuries of chaotic expansion. To Jace, who had never been higher than the 40th floor of a corporate tenement, the sheer scale of it was a physical blow. The shuttle docked with a metallic groan that vibrated through the floor plates, and when the airlock hissed open, the noise of the station hit him first. It was a roar of 1,000 languages, the thrum of atmospheric recyclers, and the magnetic hum of transport tubes. They stepped out onto the promenade, and Jace stopped dead, causing a 4-armed Tellarite merchant to grumble and shove past him. Keep moving, Sarai murmured, her hand hovering near the small of his back without touching him. To stand still is to look like a target. I am trying, Jace whispered back, his eyes darting from the neon advertisements floating in midair to the ceiling that was not a ceiling but a transparent dome revealing the hard, cold spray of stars. But there is a squid wearing a tuxedo over there, and the gravity feels like I am walking through soup. That is a diplomat from the Aquarian systems, and the gravity is set to galactic standard, which is 0.9 of Earth's. Sarai explained, her voice dry. You are simply heavy-footed. She moved through the crush of bodies with effortless grace, the crowd parting around her high-collared uniform. Jace scrambled to keep up, clutching his bag of forged documents. He felt painfully human here. Around him were beings with chitinous shells, beings made of shifting gas contained in suits, and towering figures with cybernetic limbs. The station smelled of ozone, exotic spices, and engine grease. This place is insane, Jace muttered as they stepped onto a gravity lift that whisked them upward past layers of shops and bars. How does anyone sleep? It is like Times Square had a baby with a jet engine. Most species do not require 8 hours of unconsciousness to function, Sarai said. She glanced at him, and for a moment, the stern mask of the Inquisitor slipped, replaced by a flicker of amusement. Your awe is loud, Jace. You are projecting wonder so brightly it is almost blinding. Sorry, Jace said, checking his pockets for the 3rd time. I am just a tourist at the end of the world. We are not tourists, Sarai reminded him, the humor vanishing. We are fugitives. Act like you belong. They reached the residential ring, a sector of the station known as the Warrens. It was a maze of modular housing units stacked like shipping containers, vibrating with the constant traffic of the maglev trains passing nearby. Sarai keyed a code into a rusted door panel. It slid open to reveal their safe house. It was generous to call it a room. It was a transformable living module, barely 10 feet square. The walls were gray polymer, scuffed by previous occupants. A single panel on the wall served as a bed, a table, or a desk, depending on which voice command you yelled at it. Moth, who had slipped away at the docks to meet her black market contact, was already there, sitting on the floor with her optical sensor plugged into a wall port. "Cozy," Jace said, dropping his bag. "If we stand in the middle, we can hold hands and touch all 4 walls at once." "It is secure," Sarai said, scanning the room with a handheld device. "No listening bugs, no active surveillance. Just the 3 of us and the smell of recycled air," Moth said, unplugging herself. Her human eye looked tired, while the red cybernetic one whirred softly. "I made contact. The encryption keys for the central data spine are expensive. I need 2 hours to decrypt the handshake protocol." "Take the time," Sarai said. "We cannot risk a forced entry. If we trip an alarm in the spine, the station releases neurotoxin into the server room." "Friendly," Jace noted. "I am going to the lower levels to run the decryption," Moth said, standing up and pulling her hood over her head. "The signal interference down there is better for masking my signature. Try not to kill each other while I am gone." The door slid shut behind her, leaving Jace and Sarai alone in the cramped silence. The proximity was sudden and suffocating. In the chaos of the escape, they had been moving too fast to think. Now, in the stillness, Jace was acutely aware that he was locked in a box with the woman who knew his darkest secrets and whom he had fantasized about since the moment they met. Sarai seemed to feel it too. She stood rigidly by the viewport, staring out at the rotating sections of the station. Her bioluminescent markings were pulsing a slow, rhythmic blue. "We need to prepare," she said, not turning around. "Prepare how?" Jace asked, sitting on the edge of the retracted bed panel. "I have my fake ID. I practiced my bow. I even learned how to say bathroom in 3 languages. Sarai turned. Her eyes were serious, swirling with that unnerving starlight. "We are going into the heart of the Alliance administration. There will be scanners. There will be other telepaths. If one of them brushes against your mind and feels your fear, or your knowledge of the plan, we are dead. So don't think about the plan. Got it?" "It is not that simple," she said, walking closer. The room was so small her knees almost brushed his. "You have no mental shielding. Your thoughts are a broadcast. I need to teach you how to build a wall." Jace swallowed. "Another mind link?" "A controlled one," Sarai said. "I will push. You will resist. You must visualize a barrier, a door, a wall of fire, anything that feels solid to you. Do not let me in. And if I can't, then I will know everything you are thinking," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Everything." Jace nodded, his mouth dry. "Okay, let's do it." She sat across from him. "Look at me." They locked eyes. This time, the connection hit him like a physical shove. Sarai was not being gentle. She was a battering ram of pressure, probing the edges of his consciousness. "Let me in." Her voice echoed in his skull. Jace squeezed his eyes shut. He imagined a brick wall. He imagined the heavy steel door of his apartment in New York. "Weak," Sarai thought. "I can see through the cracks. You are afraid I will see that you are trembling." "Get out!" Jace gritted through his teeth. "Make me!" She pushed harder. The brick wall crumbled. Jace gasped as images flooded his mind, not memories this time, but feelings. He was thinking about the way the light caught the curve of her neck. He was thinking about how much he wanted to reach out and trace the markings on her face. Sarai felt the image. It washed over her, a wave of heat and longing. She faltered. For a split second, the link reversed. Jace felt her shock, and beneath it, a sudden sharp spike of her own desire. She wanted to be touched. She wanted him to stop imagining and do it. Sarai broke the connection with a sharp intake of breath. "Focus!" she snapped, her cheeks flushing violet. "That was undisciplined." "I am trying," Jace argued, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It is hard to build a wall when you are shouting inside my head." "Again," she commanded. "Visualize something stronger." They went for an hour, then 2. The air in the small room grew heavy and humid. Jace was exhausted, his head pounding with a dull, rhythmic throb. Sarai was relentless. But every time the link held for more than a few seconds, the same thing happened. His defenses would slip, and his raw, unfiltered attraction would spill out. He thought about kissing her. He thought about the contrast of her cool skin against his warm hands. He thought about whether she tasted like the static electricity that seemed to hum around her. And every time, Sarai felt it. She felt the phantom sensation of his lips on hers before it even happened. It was shaking her. She had spent decades mastering control, suppressing every impulse, and now this human with his messy, loud heart was making her want to tear her own walls down. "Again," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Sarai, I can't," Jace rasped. "My head is splitting. One more time, you must be safe." She drove into his mind again. This time, Jace didn't just push back, he panicked. The pain in his temples flared into a blinding white spike. He cried out, clutching his head, and slumped forward off the bench. "Jace!" Sarai caught him before he hit the floor. She knelt, pulling him against her chest. He was trembling, his skin clammy. "Too much," she murmured, guilt cutting through her. "I pushed too hard. I am sorry." "Feels like an ice pick," Jace groaned, his eyes squeezed shut. "Shh, I can fix it." She shifted, positioning his head in her lap. She placed her long, cool hands on his temples, her thumbs resting on the pulse points of his throat. "Breathe," she instructed. She initiated the healing trance. It was a delicate, intimate use of telepathy, channeling bioelectric energy to soothe inflamed neural pathways. Her hands began to glow with a soft, white light. The pain in Jace's head began to recede, replaced by a cool, liquid sensation that flowed down his spine. He sighed, his body relaxing against her. He opened his eyes. She was hovering above him, her face framed by the ambient light of the room and the glow of her own skin. She looked ethereal, alien, and breathtakingly beautiful. His hands, acting on instinct, moved up to rest on her waist. The material of her uniform was smooth, but he could feel the warmth of her body underneath. The healing link was still open. It was a wide, unshielded bridge between them. Jace's thoughts turned hazy, drifting from gratitude to a deep, aching yearning. He looked at her lips, pale blue and perfectly shaped, and the image of kissing her filled his mind. Not a frantic, desperate kiss, but a slow, deliberate one. He imagined pulling her down to him. Sarai froze. She didn't just see the image, she felt the intent. It resonated with the secret, buried parts of herself that she had denied for so long. Her skin brightened, the blue shifting to a luminous lavender. She felt his hands on her waist, and she wanted them to move higher. She wanted to lose the control she prized so highly. The moment stretched, suspended in the silence. Their faces were inches apart. Jace's breath hitched. Sarai's pupils, usually invisible in the galaxy of her eyes, seemed to dilate. The urge to close the distance was a physical gravity pulling them together. Then, the soldier in her woke up. Sarai pulled back abruptly, scrambling to her feet. The loss of contact was jarring, leaving Jace cold. That is sufficient, she said, her voice trembling. She turned away, smoothing her uniform, refusing to look at him. The neural inflammation is gone. Jace sat up slowly, feeling the ghost of her hands on his face. Sarai, we must maintain boundaries, she said, talking to the wall. This mission relies on focus. Such distractions are dangerous. Jace stood up. His headache was gone, but his heart was hammering. Distractions? Is that what that was? Because it felt like you were right there with me. Sarai spun around, her eyes flashing. I am an inquisitor of the Alliance. You are a civilian asset. There are lines. Jace, you are inside my head, Jace shouted, frustration boiling over. You know every thought I have before I have it. How are we supposed to have lines when you are living in my brain? I am trying to keep you alive, and I am trying to figure out why you saved me. Jace stepped closer. Was it just guilt? Or was it because for once you felt something real? Jace, stop, she warned, but she didn't back away. The door hissed open. Moth strode in, carrying a bag of takeout food and looking grim. She stopped, looking between Jace's flushed face and Sarai's glowing skin. Am I interrupting a soap opera? Moth asked dryly. Because unless you two are arguing about who gets the top bunk, we have a problem. The tension in the room snapped. Sarai exhaled, the light in her skin fading back to a dull blue. Jace ran a hand through his hair, turning away. What is it? Sarai asked, her voice returning to its command pitch. Moth threw a data chip onto the table. I cracked the scheduling logs. The timeline has moved up. The orbital strike on Chicago isn't in 3 weeks, it is in 4 days. The air left the room. 4 days, Jace whispered. Why? Because of the leak, Moth said. Your leak, Jace, the one you sent me. They know there is a breach, so they are accelerating the plan to stabilize the sector before the truth gets out. We are out of time. Sarai's face hardened. The vulnerable woman from moments ago vanished, replaced by the High Inquisitor. Then we go tonight, she said. We infiltrate the data spine, secure the proof and broadcast it before the order can be given. The infiltration of the central data spine was not an action movie montage. It was a slow, agonizing exercise in terror. Jace wore the gray tunic of a standard-class assistant. Sarai was in full uniform, her rank insignia polished to a shine. They walked down the pristine white corridors of the administration sector, surrounded by Alliance officials and high-ranking diplomats. Shoulders back, Sarai murmured through the comms bead in Jace's ear. You are invisible. You are furniture. Do not make eye contact. Jace stared at the floor, clutching a stack of data pads. His heart was a jackhammer against his ribs. Every time a security drone floated past, he expected a laser bolt to the back of the head. They reached the security checkpoint for the archive level. A massive 4-legged alien with a heavy weapon strapped to its chest blocked the path. Identification, the guard grunted. Sarai presented her wrist comp. High Inquisitor Sarai, I am conducting an unscheduled audit of the Sector 7 projections. The guard scanned her codes. I have no authorization for an audit. Inquisitor. That is the nature of a surprise audit, Sarai said, her voice dripping with icy condescension. Would you like me to file a report on your obstructionism? I can have your rank stripped before lunch. The guard hesitated. He looked at Sarai's eyes, the eyes of a truth reader, and quailed. Proceed, he grumbled, stepping aside. They walked through the blast doors. As soon as they were out of sight, Jace let out a breath that sounded like a deflating tire. You are terrifying, he whispered. I am efficient, Sarai corrected. Now, connect Moth. They found a terminal node in a service alcove. Jace plugged in the decryptor Moth had given them. "I am in." Moth's voice crackled in their ears from the safe house. "I am looping the camera feeds. You have 5 minutes before the system realizes I am not a maintenance protocol." They moved deeper into the spine. The room was a cavern of towering crystal obelisks, each one glowing with the data of 1,000 worlds. It was beautiful and cold. "Here," Sarai said, stopping at a black obelisk. "The Earth Directorate Archives." She placed her hand on the interface. Her eyes glowed white as she mentally interfaced with the machine. Jace watched her, mesmerized by the way the light played across her face. "I found it," she said, her voice tight. "The directive, it is signed by High Counselor Vane and the Earth Interim President." "Download it," Jace said. "Get everything." "Wait." Sarai pulled her hand back as if bitten. "Jace, look at this." She projected the data onto a holographic screen. Jace squinted at the floating text. It wasn't just Chicago. The list of targets scrolled down. Sector 7, human. Hive Cluster 4, insectoid dissidents. The free colonies of Mars. "It is a purge," Jace breathed. "They aren't just hitting us. They are hitting everyone. The Alliance is clearing the board." Sarai stared at the screen. She saw her own reports attached to the files. Psychological profiles she had written. Weakness assessments she had conducted. They were using her work to target dissident groups across 5 different species. "I did this," she whispered. "I gave them the map." "You didn't know," Jace said, grabbing her arm. "Sarai, look at me. You didn't know." "I should have looked," she cried, her voice echoing in the cavern. "I was so busy following orders I didn't see the weapon I was building." "We can stop it," Jace said. "We leak it now. Dump the raw data to the public net." "No," Sarai snapped. "If we dump raw data, they will claim it is a deep fake. They control the media channels. They will spin it, and then they will launch the strikes early to silence the chaos. We need the encryption keys to prove it is real, and we need to hijack the emergency broadcast system to force them to listen." "We don't have time for a hijack," Jace yelled. "People are going to die while we argue about formatting." "And if we miss, everyone dies." Sarai grabbed his shoulders. "Jace, listen to me. We have one shot." "I am scared, Sarai," Jace admitted, his voice breaking. "I am just a guy who translates manuals. I am a coward. I ran away from my family and I ran away from my debts. I can't do this." Sarai looked at him. She saw the fear, but she also saw the man who had risked his life to drag a stranger out of an alleyway. "You are not a coward," she said fiercely. "I have been inside your mind, Jace Reynolds. I have seen you stand up when it would have been easier to kneel. You are the bravest man I have ever met because you are terrified and you are still standing here." Jace stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy with the things they couldn't say. "I can't stop thinking about you," he blurted out. "Even now, even with the world ending, I look at you and I don't see the Inquisitor. I just see you." Sarai's breath caught. "And I am drawn to your truth, Jace. It is the only real thing I have found in a long time." The air between them crackled. "Intruder alert. Sector 9. The mechanical voice boomed from the ceiling. Red lights began to flash. "Moth!" Jace yelled into his comms. "They found the loop!" Moth screamed. "Get out! You have company!" The blast doors at the end of the hall slid open. A squad of armed security drones poured in, followed by 3 Elith Inquisitors in black robes. "Surrender!" the lead Inquisitor commanded, his voice a psychic hammer blow. Jace doubled over, clutching his head. "Run!" Sarai shouted. She didn't reach for a weapon. She stepped in front of Jace, Facing her own kind, she gathered every ounce of her psychic strength. She didn't use the gentle precision of the interrogation room. She pulled raw energy from the station's own power grid, channeling it through her nervous system. She screamed. A shockwave of telekinetic force exploded from her body. It shattered the crystal obelisks nearby, sending shards of data flying like shrapnel. It hit the drones, crumpling them into scrap metal. It hit the other Inquisitors, slamming them back against the walls with the force of a freight train. But the cost was immediate. Sarai collapsed, blood streaming from her nose and eyes. Her bioluminescent markings flared blindingly bright and then went dark. "Sarai!" Jace scrambled to her. She was limp, her eyes rolled back. "Go," she mumbled, her voice slurring. "Burned out." "Not without you," Jace gritted. He grabbed her arm and hauled her up. She was dead weight, taller and heavier than him, but adrenaline gave him strength he didn't know he had. Laser fire chewed up the floor behind them. "Moth! Emergency exit!" Jace screamed. "Service hatch! 3 meters to your left!" Jace dragged Sarai to the hatch, punched the manual release, and threw them both into the darkness of the maintenance shaft. They slid down the chute, tumbling over cables and pipes, landing hard on a metal grate 2 levels down. Jace lay there for a second, gasping for air, his arm wrapped around Sarai. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow. "I got you," he whispered, stroking her hair. "I got you." Back in the safe house, the mood was funereal. Moth was pacing, swearing in binary. Jace had laid Sarai on the bed. She was pale, her skin gray and dull. A trickle of glowing blue fluid, elith blood, leaked from her ear. "Is she?" Moth asked, stopping her pacing. "She is alive," Jace said, his voice shaking. He dipped a cloth in water and gently wiped the blood from her face. "She burned herself out. A psychic overload." He touched her hand. It was cold. "She saved me," Jace whispered. "She took on 3 of them." He looked at her face, the stillness of it, the vulnerability. He realized then that the attraction he had felt wasn't just a crush or a fascination. It was a tether. He was anchored to her. Sarai stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open. The starlight in her eyes was dim, like a dying ember. "Oh, Jace," she rasped. "I am here," he said, leaning close. "We are safe. You got us out." She looked at him, her vision blurry. She tried to reach for his mind, to check if he was hurt, but her telepathy was silent. The silence was terrifying. "I can't hear you," she whispered, panic edging into her voice. "It is quiet. I can't." "It is okay," Jace said, taking her hand and pressing it to his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. "You don't need to hear my thoughts. Just listen to my voice. I am not going anywhere." She squeezed his hand, weak but desperate. "We have the data," she whispered. "But we need the key." "Rest," Jace said. "We will figure it out." He stayed there, kneeling beside the bed, holding the hand of the alien woman who had broken her own mind to save him. The danger was outside the door, waiting, but in that cramped, dim room, the bond between them hardened into something unbreakable. He knew now that he would burn the whole galaxy down if it meant keeping her safe, and he had a terrible feeling he might have to. The headache was not a pain, it was a color. It was a blinding, sickly yellow that pulsed behind Sarai's eyes, obscuring the world in a haze of static. She tried to reach out with her mind, to sense the familiar hum of the station's biorhythms. But there was only silence. Her telepathy, the sense she had relied on since birth, was gone. It was like waking up blind. She gasped, sitting up too quickly, and the room spun. "Whoa! Easy," a voice said. "The gravity is still on standard setting. You do not want to fall off the bed." Sarai blinked, the yellow haze receding enough to reveal the cramped gray walls of the safe house module. Jace was sitting in the corner on an overturned crate, watching her. He looked terrible. His eyes were rimmed with red, his hair was a disaster of static cling, and he was holding a cup of lukewarm calf like it was a lifeline. "Jace," she rasped. Her throat felt like she had swallowed glass. "Welcome back to the land of the conscious," Jace said, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You were out for 12 hours. I was starting to calculate my hourly rate for hero rescue services. It is not cheap, you know. I charge extra for emotional distress and holding your hand while you mumble about geometric shapes." Sarai looked down. Her hand was resting on the blanket, and she could feel the lingering warmth where his had been. She realized with a jolt that he had been holding it until the moment she woke up. "I burned out," she whispered, looking at her hands. The bioluminescent markings on her skin were dull, barely visible against the pale blue of her flesh. "I used a kinetic blast. It drained my neural reserves. I am empty." "You are alive," Jace said firmly. He stood up and walked over, offering her the cup. "And you saved us, so drink this sludge. It tastes like engine coolant, but it has caffeine." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. He didn't pull away, but she saw the tremor in his hand. He was terrified. She had always seen him as the fragile one, the soft human who needed protecting, but now the roles were reversed. She was the invalid, and he was the sentry. "You stayed awake," she noted, sipping the bitter liquid. "Someone had to watch the door." Jace shrugged, though his voice was tight. "Moth is out hunting for data. I figured if the space Gestapo came knocking, I could bore them to death with facts about Earth import taxes." Sarai lowered the cup. "You were scared I wouldn't wake up." Jace looked at her, his defenses crumbling for a second. "Yeah. You turned gray. Sarai, like actual gray. I didn't know if that was a thing your species did before they, you know, died," she finished for him. "Yeah, that." He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "Don't do it again. I don't look good in black." The humor was a thin shield, but it softened the air between them. For the first time, Sarai didn't feel the need to scan him to know what he was feeling. She could see it in the slump of his shoulders and the way he hovered close to the bed, ready to catch her if she swooned. It was unsettling to be so seen, yet strangely anchoring. The door hissed open, and Moth strode in. The cyborg hacker looked wired, her red optical implants spinning rapidly. "The sleeping beauty is awake," Moth said, tossing a data chip onto the small table. "Good. We have work to do, and I am tired of listening to Jace pace. He walks in circles. It is very annoying." "Did you get the files?" Sarai asked, her voice strengthening as the soldier in her took over. "Yes and no," Moth said. "I managed to scrape a partial backup from the server before you blew up the room. We have the metadata. We have the dates, the targets, the casualty projections, but we don't have the signatures." "The signatures?" Jace asked. "The authorization keys," Sarai explained, swinging her legs off the bed. She felt dizzy but forced herself to stand. Jace's hand shot out to steady her elbow, and she leaned into him for a second before finding her balance. "Without the digital signatures of the High Council, the Alliance will claim the files are forgeries. They will say it was a simulation exercise created by hackers." "Exactly," Moth said. "But the keys aren't on the server. They are bio-locked. They are stored in the personal neural implants of high envoys." Sarai froze. A cold knot formed in her stomach. "There is a diplomatic reception tonight," Moth continued, bringing up a holographic schematic of the station's upper levels. "To celebrate the upcoming summit, all the big players are there, including High Envoy Thalen." The name hit Sarai like a physical blow. "Thalen is here?" she whispered. "Who is Thalen?" Jace asked, looking between them. "He is my mentor," Sarai said, her voice hollow. "He found me when I was a child initiate. He trained me. He is the closest thing I have to a father." "Well," Moth said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle, "he is also the one holding the encryption key for the Earth Directive. If we want to prove this conspiracy is real, someone needs to get close enough to him to touch his mind and copy the code." Jace looked at Sarai, horror dawning on his face. "You want her to walk in there? She is a fugitive. She is barely standing." "I can do it," Sarai said, though her knees felt like water. "Thalen trusts me. He won't know I have been branded a traitor yet. The warrant was issued by the Security Bureau. But Thalen is diplomatic corps. The systems don't always talk to each other immediately." "It is a trap," Jace argued. "It has to be." "It is the only way," Sarai said, turning to look at him. "Thalen has the key. If I can get close to him, I can verify the truth. I need to know if he is part of this." "And if he is," Jace asked softly, "then I will do what is necessary," Sarai said. But even she didn't know if she was telling the truth. The preparation for the reception was a surreal interlude in the nightmare. Moth had acquired stolen formal attire from a high-end fabricator on the promenade. Sarai emerged from the small refresher unit. The gown was a deep, shimmering indigo, cut in the traditional Elith style. It left her shoulders and arms bare, exposing the intricate bioluminescent markings that were slowly regaining their glow. The fabric seemed to flow like liquid around her tall, slender frame. Jace was standing by the mirror, tugging at the collar of a stiff velvet-like suit that Moth had insisted was the height of fashion for a human cultural attaché. He turned when he heard Sarai step out. His hands froze on his tie. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked at her, his eyes wide and unguarded. "You look—" Jace started, then cleared his throat. "You look dangerous, like start a war dangerous." Sarai felt a flush of heat that had nothing to do with her recovering neural pathways. She smoothed the silk of her dress. "It is ceremonial armor. Just soft." "It is not armor," Jace said, walking closer. "Armor hides you, that—" He gestured vaguely at her glowing arms. "That shows everything." "Does it bother you?" she asked, a tease slipping into her voice despite the tension. "To see the alien so clearly?" "It bothers me that I can't look away," Jace murmured. The banter was there, but it was heavy, edged with a longing that filled the small room. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from her shoulder. "You are glowing again. The color is different." "It is anticipation," Sarai said, her breath catching. "And fear." "We make a hell of a pair," Jace said, dropping his hand before he made contact. "The coffee fetcher and the galaxy's most wanted woman. If we pull this off, I expect a very expensive dinner." "If we pull this off," Sarai said, her eyes darkening, "we will be lucky to survive the night." "Way to kill the mood," Jace sighed. "All right, let's go steal secrets from your dad." The grand observation deck was a masterpiece of intimidation. The ceiling was a single pane of hyperglass, offering a panoramic view of the nebula the station orbited. The room was filled with the elite of 100 worlds, beings draped in silks, furs, and light-weaving fabrics, sipping drinks that smoked and sparkled. Sarai and Jace entered from the lower concourse. Jace felt like a child wearing his father's suit. He kept waiting for someone to point a finger and scream, "Imposter!" But Sarai changed the moment they crossed the threshold. She straightened her spine, her chin lifting, her movement slowed, becoming languid and regal. She didn't look like a fugitive, she looked like royalty. She nodded to a passing Rigelian ambassador, her expression one of polite, distant boredom. Jace watched her, stunned. It was seamless. The terrified woman who had fainted in his arms was gone, replaced by the High Inquisitor. "You are really good at that," Jace whispered as they took glasses of blue wine from a hovering tray. "At what?" Sarai murmured, smiling pleasantly at a passing dignitary. "Lying," Jace said. "Being one of them. It is unnerving." Sarai glanced at him, and for a second the mask slipped. "It is a performance. Jace, don't mistake the costume for the person." "I am trying," Jace said, taking a large gulp of the wine. It tasted like cinnamon and electricity. "But you fit in here. I fit in a cubicle." "There he is," Sarai whispered, her body going rigid. Across the room, standing near a fountain that defied gravity, was an older Elith male. He was tall, his skin a deep, weathered cobalt, his markings etched like ancient riverbeds on his face. He wore the silver robes of a high envoy. "Thalen," Sarai breathed. "Go," Jace said. "I will create a distraction if you need it. I am great at spilling things." "Stay close," she commanded softly, "but not too close." She glided across the room. Jace watched her go, feeling a sharp pang of jealousy mixed with fear. She belonged to this world of stars and power. He was just the anchor dragging her down. He turned and nearly bumped into a short, stout human man holding a cigar that smelled of burnt plastic. The man wore the sash of the Earth Interim Council. "Watch it, son," the man grunted. Then he squinted at Jace's badge. "Cultural attaché? Didn't know we had the budget for culture these days." "It is a small budget," Jace said, his voice tight. "Mostly pamphlets." The man laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Pamphlets. That is rich. Enjoy the party while it lasts. Kid, I hear the budget is about to get a lot tighter. We are trading a few cities for a permanent seat at the big table. About time, if you ask me. You have to trim the branches to save the tree, right?" Jace froze. The man was talking about the orbital strike. He was talking about the murder of millions like it was a landscaping decision. "Trim the branches," Jace repeated, gripping his glass. "Those branches are people, families." The official shrugged, puffing on his cigar. "Casualties of progress. You want to make an omelet, you have to break a few Chicagos." Jace felt a hot, red rage climb up his throat. He had drunk the alien wine too fast, and it was mixing with his adrenaline. "You know," Jace said, his voice rising, "I heard the Alliance prefers their omelets made with spineless bureaucrats. I think you would be delicious." The official blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said," Jace leaned in, "that you are selling out your own species for a shiny badge. How much was the payout? Was it worth the acceptable loss of dignity?" People were starting to turn. Jace didn't care. He wanted to punch the man. He wanted to scream. Suddenly, a cool hand gripped his arm. "My apologies, Councilman." Sarai's voice was smooth as silk. She had appeared out of nowhere. "My assistant has a terrible reaction to Centaurian wine. It makes him... Hallucinations are common. Come, Jace." She dragged him away before the official could respond, steering him forcefully toward the balcony doors. Outside, the air was thin and cold. The noise of the party was muffled by the glass doors. They stood on a floating platform, the stars burning cold and indifferent above them. Sarai released his arm. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "You nearly started a brawl with a council member." "He knew," Jace shouted, throwing his hands up. He was joking about it. Breaking a few Chicago, they are monsters. Sarai, all of them. And you walked in there and shook hands with them. I was doing the job, Sarai snapped. I was getting the key. Did you get it? Yes. And what did Thalen say? Jace demanded. Did he cry? Did he apologize? Or did he tell you it was for the greater good? Sarai turned away, looking out at the void. Her shoulders were shaking. He was happy to see me, she whispered. He hugged me. He asked if I was eating enough. And when I touched his mind, her voice broke. He believes it, Jace. He believes that if we don't sacrifice the dissidents, the Alliance will fracture into civil war. He thinks he is saving the galaxy. He is a fanatic, Jace spat. He is my father. Sarai spun around, her eyes blazing with tears. In every way that matters. And I just stole the evidence that will have him executed for treason. He made his choice, Jace said, though his anger was faltering in the face of her pain. It is not just him, Sarai said. She stepped closer, her expression crumbling. I saw the contingency plans, Jace, in his memory. If the leak happens, if we succeed, they need a scapegoat. Jace went still. What kind of scapegoat? A human terrorist, Sarai said, a tear tracking through the glowing markings on her cheek. They have a profile ready. They will claim a rogue human radical hacked the system to fabricate the data. They will broadcast his execution to prove justice has been done. She looked at him, her eyes wide and terrified. The profile is you, Jace. They are going to kill you. The silence on the balcony was absolute. The stars seemed to stop twinkling. Jace let out a breath. Me? I am the coffee guy. How am I the mastermind? Because you are the one who ran, Sarai said. She reached out, her hands trembling, and touched his face. I saw the order in his mind. Liquidate Subject Reynolds upon capture. She was shaking apart. The cool, controlled Inquisitor was gone. She was just a woman standing on a ledge, terrified of losing the one thing she had found that was real. Sarai, Jace said softly. He covered her hands with his own. Hey, look at me. She looked. Her eyes were swimming with grief. If they catch us, Jace said. They catch us, but we are not dead yet. I can't let them hurt you, she whispered. I have spent my whole life watching people get hurt. I can't watch you. Then don't, Jace said. He stepped closer, closing the gap between them. Stop looking at the future. Be here, right now. Jace, if this is it, he said, his voice rough with emotion, if we are going to burn for this, I want one thing that is ours. No lies, no politics, no reports. He looked at her lips. Sarai felt his desire wash over her, not through a mind link, but through the heat of his body, the scent of him, the way he looked at her like she was the only star in the sky. Her own control shattered. She didn't want to be the Inquisitor. She didn't want to be the Alith. She just wanted him. She made a sound, half sob, half gasp, and pulled him down to her. Their lips met. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision. It was desperate and messy and fierce, fueled by fear and adrenaline and days of suppressed longing. And the moment they touched, the mind link flared. Sarai didn't try to stop it. Jace didn't try to block it. The barrier dissolved. Jace felt her terror, her guilt, but overwhelming it all was a blinding, white-hot need for him. She tasted like starlight and electricity. He felt her hands in his hair, gripping him like she would fall if she let go. Sarai felt him. She felt the roughness of his hands on her waist, the pounding of his heart against hers. She felt his awe of her, his confusion, and a love so sudden and fierce it frightened her. He didn't care about the markings. He didn't care about the alien blood. He wanted her. The kiss deepened, pressing them against the railing of the balcony. The universe narrowed down to the friction of skin and the tangle of minds. Sarai's skin flared with color, blues shifting to intense violets and golds, illuminating them in the darkness. It was too much, and it wasn't enough. It was the terrifying intimacy of being completely known. They broke apart, gasping for air, foreheads resting against each other. Jace's hands were still clutching her waist, her fingers were tangled in his collar. "Wow," Jace breathed, his voice shaking. "That was—" Sarai couldn't find the word in any language. "Dangerous." "Yeah," Jace said, opening his eyes. He looked dazed. "Definitely dangerous." Sarai pulled back slightly, her hands sliding down to his chest. She could feel his heart hammering a frantic rhythm that matched her own. "We have crossed a line," she whispered. "If the Alliance catches us now, they can use this. They can use you to break me." "Let them try," Jace said, and there was a new steel in his voice. "I am not going to be a martyr, Sarai, and I am not going to let them touch you." "You are a foolish human," she said, but she smiled, and it was a real, sad, beautiful smile. "I am learning," he said. "Come on, let's go save the galaxy so I can take you on a second date." The return to the safe house was a blur of shadows and stealth. They moved differently now, closer, their bodies naturally gravitating toward each other. When the door slid open, Moth looked up from her monitors. She took one look at Jace's disheveled tie and Sarai's flushed, glowing skin, and snorted. "Finally," Moth said. "I assume the galactic makeout break is over because I have been sitting here watching the countdown clock and eating freeze-dried algae." "We have the key," Sarai said, ignoring the heat rising in her cheeks. She tapped her temple. "It is here." "And?" Moth asked. "And it confirms everything," Sarai said, her voice turning hard. "Thalen is involved. The order for the strike is locked. But we have the decryption sequence." Moth held out a data port cable. "Plug in. Let's see what we bought with your dignity." Sarai placed the interface patch against her temple. The data streamed out of her mind and onto the screens. Files cascaded down the monitors, video logs, voice recordings, signed orders. It was a mountain of evidence. It showed the meetings where they discussed the acceptable casualties. It showed the vote tallies. It showed the script they had written for the news anchors to read after Chicago burned. "It is all here," Jace said, reading the screen over Moth's shoulder. "Undeniable proof." "Great," Moth said. "So we post it on the extranet, and they scrub it in 10 seconds. We need a platform they can't silence." "The summit," Sarai said. She pointed to a schedule on the screen. "Tomorrow at noon. The High Council is broadcasting a live address to all member worlds. It is an interstellar signal. It overrides all local filters. You want to hijack the Council broadcast?" Moth whistled low. "That is insane. The security on the transmission hub will be military grade." "It is a one-shot mission," Sarai admitted. "Once we break into the signal, they will pinpoint our location instantly. We will have maybe 3 minutes to stream the data before they send a strike team to vaporize the room." 3 minutes, Jace repeated. He looked at the screen, then at Sarai. He remembered the balcony. He remembered the feeling of her mind touching his. He remembered the official joking about trading cities. 3 minutes is enough to change the truth, Jace said. "We probably won't get out," Moth said, her voice devoid of its usual sarcasm. "Just so we are clear, this is a one-way trip." "I know," Jace said. He took Sarai's hand, her fingers interlaced with his. Strong and sure. "We do it," Sarai said. For the truth, Jace echoed. And for the omelets, Moth added, cracking her knuckles. Let's go break some eggs. The Grand Summit Hall of Orbital Station Theta was a cathedral of glass and gold, designed to make every being inside feel small. Thousands of delegates sat in concentric rings, their robes and uniforms creating a kaleidoscope of color under the artificial sun. On the central podium, High Envoy Thalen stood with his arms raised, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the room. We stand at a crossroads, Thalen boomed, his deep voice resonant with gravitas. The galaxy is vast, and chaos is the natural state of the universe. To maintain peace, we must be willing to make difficult choices. We must be willing to sacrifice the few to save the many. The applause was polite, ripple-like, in the closed-door session that would follow in 1 hour. The difficult choice to authorize the orbital strike on Chicago and 5 other dissident strongholds would be signed into law. 500 feet below the applause, in the suffocating heat of the station's engineering bowels. Jace Reynolds was crawling through a ventilation shaft that smelled of burnt ozone and rat droppings. I hate vents, Jace wheezed, his knees scraping against the metal. Why is it always vents? Why can't we infiltrate a nice, air-conditioned hallway? Because the hallways have laser grids, Sarai whispered from ahead of him. She moved silently, her lithe form sliding through the cramped space with eerie grace. And because you are loud. I am stealthy, Jace protested, banging his shin against a bolt. Ow. That was a stealthy ow. Quiet, Moth hissed from behind him. We are approaching the communications core. The thermal sensors are active. They dropped down into a maintenance corridor. This was the nervous system of the station, a labyrinth of humming quantum relays, cooling pipes thick with frost, and bundles of fiber optic cables as wide as tree trunks. The plan was simple, suicidal and terrifying. Senil. Break into the broadcast hub, hijack the signal, tell the truth, die. Checkpoint ahead, Moth warned, checking her wrist comp. 2 automated sentries and a bioscanner. I will handle the scanner, Sarai said. Moth, loop the sentries. They moved fast. Moth plugged into a wall port, her cybernetic eyes spinning as she fought the station's AI. The sentry drones paused in their patrol, their red eyes flickering. Sarai placed her hand on the bioscanner panel, pulsing a low-level telepathic static that confused its sensors into reading Maintenance Crew Alpha. The door hissed open. They were inside the outer ring. But as they rounded a corner, a door opened ahead of them. An Elith technician stepped out, holding a datapad. He froze. He looked at Sarai, at her torn formal gown, her glowing markings, the desperate set of her jaw. High Inquisitor? The technician stammered, recognition dawning. There is an alert for you. You are listed as... Sarai didn't hesitate. She didn't have time for a mind wipe. She stepped forward, her hand flashing out in a precise kinetic strike to his nerve cluster. The technician folded like a rag doll. Sorry, she whispered, catching him before he hit the floor and dragging him into a shadow. That was close, Jace breathed, wiping sweat from his forehead. Too close. Move, Sarai commanded. The audit cycle starts in 3 minutes. If we are not in the core by then, the lockdown seals the doors. They sprinted through the maze of machinery. Moth was lagging, her cooling fans whirring loudly. My heat sink is failing, she gasped. I am running too many loops. Almost there, Jace urged, grabbing her arm to pull her along. They reached the blast doors of the central broadcast hub. It was a massive circular chamber dominated by a pillar of white light, the quantum entanglement transmitter. This was the throat of the Alliance, the device that could speak to 1 billion worlds at once. Moth threw herself at the control console. Okay. I am bypassing the firewalls. I need 30 seconds. We don't have 30 seconds, Sarai said, watching the security monitor. They know we are here. I am in, Moth shouted. But, damn it. What? Jace asked, crowding her. There is a fail-safe, Moth said, her voice shaking. A biometric lock. It is not a password. It is a resonance key. To override the system-wide broadcast, it requires a dual neural input. English! Moth! Jace yelled. It needs 2 people. Moth snapped. 2 biologically distinct neural signatures fused into a single coherent pattern. It is designed for the High Counselors to project unity. They link their minds to authorize emergency alerts. So we link up, Jace said. Me and Sarai. We have done it before. Not like this, Sarai said, her face pale. She was staring at the glowing interface platform in the center of the room. The bond I used on you before was a surface link. I looked at you. This system requires a fusion. It forces 2 minds to become one functional consciousness. She turned to Jace, her eyes wide with the fear he had never seen in her. Jace, this is not telepathy. It is surgery. It will strip away every wall you have. I will see everything. Not just your memories, but the things you don't even admit to yourself. Your darkest shames. Your weirdest fantasies. The times you were petty or cruel. Everything. And I will see yours? Jace asked. Yes. Every doubt. Every cold, calculated manipulation I have ever performed. She took a breath. And it is permanent. The echo of it. We might never get each other out of our heads. The blast door behind them shuddered. Sparks flew as a plasma cutter began to slice through the lock. They are cutting through, Moth screamed. Decide, now! Jace looked at the door. He looked at the pillar of light that could save Chicago. And then he looked at Sarai. He saw the terror in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of being seen. She was afraid that if he saw the real her, the Inquisitor, the weapon, he would turn away. Hey, Jace said, his voice surprisingly steady. He took her hands. If you are going to judge me, at least judge the whole mess. I have some very embarrassing teenage poetry in there. Try not to laugh. Jace, she whispered, this will hurt. I know, he said. Do it. They stepped onto the platform. Energy arcs flared around them, humming with a terrifying power. Place your hands on the interface, Sarai instructed, her voice trembling. Look at me. Don't look away. Jace put his hands on the glowing panels. He locked eyes with Sarai. Ready, he said. Initiate, Sarai commanded. The world dissolved. It wasn't like falling. It was like exploding. There was no transition. 1 second Jace was Jace, and the next, he was them. He felt the cold, disciplined architecture of Sarai's mind, a cathedral of ice and silence. He felt the crushing weight of her duty, the years of isolation, the deep, starving loneliness she hid behind her uniform. And she felt him. She felt the chaotic, messy, vibrant storm of his humanity. She felt his fear of abandonment, stemming from the day his father left. She felt the shame of his unpaid debts. She felt the way he used humor to hide the fact that he was terrified of being ordinary. And then, deeper. They tumbled into the basement of each other's souls. Sarai saw the way he thought about her. It wasn't just attraction, it was a worshipful, terrifying awe. She saw the fantasies, him touching her skin, him waking up next to her, him wanting to be the one thing in the universe she didn't have to control. She felt his desire like a physical heat, raw and undeniable. Jace saw her secret wish, He saw her imagining a life where she wasn't a weapon. He saw her looking at him not as a subject, but as a lifeline. He felt her desire for him, a fierce, possessive hunger that shocked him with its intensity. She wanted to be held. She wanted to be known. The shame evaporated, and there was no room for it. There was only the blinding, terrifying truth of being completely naked before another being. It was more intimate than sex. It was a fusion of identity. "I see you," Jace said. "I have you," Sarai answered. The boundary between I and you vanished. There was only us. A surge of power roared through the pillar of light. The broadcast system accepted the fused signature. Authorization accepted. Override initiated. The screens in the Grand Summit Hall flickered and died. The holographic speeches vanished. In their place, a single image appeared. It was Jace and Sarai, standing in the core, their eyes glowing with a unified, blinding white light. They spoke, but their mouths didn't move in sync. The voice that boomed across the galaxy was a harmonic chord of male and female, human and Elith. "Citizens of the Alliance," the voice said, "we are the truth you were not meant to see." Documents began to scroll across the screens of 1,000,000,000 terminals, the casualty projections, the signed orders, the emails joking about trimming the branches. "You have been told that peace requires silence," the fused voice continued. "You have been told that security requires sacrifice. Today, we show you the price of that sacrifice." In the core, Jace and Sarai were burning. The neural load was immense. Jace felt his synapses firing like overheated wires. The pain was blinding, but Sarai's discipline held him together. She wrapped her mind around his, a structure of steel supporting a house of wood. "Hold on," she whispered in their shared mind. "Just a little longer." "I am here," he answered. "I am not leaving." The door to the core blew inward with a deafening crash. Thalen strode in, flanked by a squad of heavy assault drones. His face was a mask of fury and heartbreak. "Sarai!" Thalen roared, his voice cracking. "Stop this! You are destroying everything!" He saw them on the platform, his protege bonded to a human, their minds fused in an act of forbidden intimacy. "End the broadcast," Thalen commanded the drones. "Target the interface." "No!" Sarai screamed, not with her voice, but with the broadcast. Through the bond, Jace felt the full force of Thalen's betrayal. He felt Sarai's agony at seeing her father figure point a weapon at her. "He loves you," Jace realized, seeing Thalen's hesitation. "But he loves the Order more. He is wrong," Sarai thought back. "Order built on lies is just a cage." "Thalen!" Sarai's voice boomed from the speakers, mixed with Jace's defiance. "Look at the data. Look at what you signed. You are not saving the galaxy, you are culling it." "It is necessary," Thalen shouted, stepping closer, ignoring the humming energy of the core. "Chaos will consume us. If we do not control the narrative, billions will die in civil war. I am doing this for you, Sarai, to build a world where you are safe." "I don't want to be safe," Jace and Sarai yelled together. "I want to be free." Thalen raised his hand. "Fire!" The drones raised their weapons. "Moth!" Jace and Sarai shouted from the corner console. Moth slammed her fist into a breaker switch. "Gravity is a suggestion anyway." She overloaded the local gravity plating. The room lurched. Up became sideways. The drones were slammed into the ceiling. Thalen was thrown against the wall. In the chaos, Jace and Sarai held onto the platform, their hands locked, their minds fused. "We have to finish it," Jace thought. "We have to release the source code, the control architecture, show them how they are being manipulated." "It will burn us out," Sarai warned. "The bandwidth is too high. It will fry our neural pathways." "Better burnt than dead," Jace thought. "Do it," They pushed. They didn't just stream the files, they opened the floodgates. They poured the entire database of the Alliance Security Bureau into the public net. Every algorithm, every shadow protocol, every spy network. The strain was agony. Jace screamed, blood running from his nose. He felt his mind starting to fray, memories dissolving into white noise. Jace! Sarai's presence wrapped around him, desperate and fierce. She took the brunt of the load, shielding his fragile human mind with her own trained psyche. She absorbed the pain, letting it sear her nerves to spare him. I got you, she thought, echoing his words from the vent. I got you. Thalen managed to brace himself against a pipe. He pulled a disruptor pistol from his robes. He aimed at the platform. I am sorry, Sarai. He wept. He fired. Sarai saw it coming. She didn't dodge. She didn't break the link. She twisted their bodies, throwing Jace behind her. The blast hit the energy shield of the platform, shattering it. The feedback loop exploded, the link severed. Jace was thrown backward, skidding across the floor. Sarai collapsed on the platform, smoke rising from her dress. Sarai! Jace screamed, scrambling to his hands and knees. The room was silent. The broadcast had ended. The data was out. Thalen floated near the ceiling, unconscious from the gravity fluctuation. The drones were scrap. Jace crawled to the platform. Sarai was lying still. Her skin was gray, the markings dark. Sarai, please, Jace sobbed, grabbing her hand. Don't you dare leave me with this mess. He felt a faint, fluttering pulse in her wrist. And then, he heard a whisper in his head. Faint, broken, like a radio tuned between stations. Loud, you are so loud, Jace. He laughed, tears streaming down his face. I am loud. You are the one shouting in my brain. He gathered her into his arms, rocking her back and forth. The galaxy outside was burning with the truth they had lit. But in the center of the chaos, Jace just held on to the woman who knew everything about him and realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. The door burst open again. This time, it wasn't security. It was a motley crew of station workers, dock hands, and junior officers, humans and aliens alike, brandishing tools and improvised weapons. They looked at the unconscious Thalen. They looked at the destroyed drones, and then they looked at Jace holding Sarai. A young ensign stepped forward. She looked at the screen where the data was still scrolling. Is it true? She asked. Jace looked up, wiping blood from his lip. Yeah, he said hoarsely. It is all true. He looked down at Sarai, who was stirring, her eyes fluttering open to reveal a sliver of starlight. And we are not done yet. The galaxy did not end with a bang. It ended with a push notification. In the hours following the broadcast, the silence that fell over orbital station Theta was heavier than the gravity plating. It was the silence of a million held breaths. Then, the screaming started. It began in the Grand Summit Hall, where delegates from 36 worlds realized they had been stripped naked before their constituents. It spread to the docking bays, where panic turned into a stampede for the shuttles. And finally, it reached Earth, where the screens on the megacities switched from the calm, reassuring face of the High Envoy to the scrolling columns of raw, bloody data. The orbital strike on Chicago was canceled 40 minutes after the broadcast ended. It was not canceled because the Alliance leadership suddenly grew a conscience. It was canceled because the sheer volume of data released by Jace and Sarai, the specific targeting vectors, the projected death tolls, the emails joking about collateral damage, made the operation political suicide. To proceed would have been to declare open war on the civilian population of the entire sector. The Alliance paused. The gun was lowered, not out of mercy, but out of embarrassment. 3 days later, Jace Reynolds woke up in a medical bay that smelled of ozone and antiseptic lemon. His first sensation was not pain, but a strange, echoing duality. He felt the scratch of the sheet against his legs, but he also felt a deep, resonant ache in his left shoulder, an ache that wasn't his. He felt thirsty, but simultaneously, he felt a wave of profound relief that had nothing to do with water. "You are thinking about water," a voice said, "but you are feeling my relief." Jace blinked his eyes open. The room was dim, illuminated only by the floor lighting. He was lying on a bio-bed. Next to him, separated by a narrow aisle, Sarai lay on a matching unit. She looked tired. Her skin was a pale, washed-out blue, and the bioluminescent markings on her face were faint, pulsing with a slow, weak rhythm. But she was awake, and she was looking at him with eyes that seemed to hold the reflection of his own soul. "Hey," Jace croaked. His voice sounded like he had swallowed gravel. "I am alive." "We are alive," Sarai corrected gently. Jace tried to sit up, and a sharp pain shot through his temples. Instantly, Sarai winced, her hand flying to her own head. "Sorry," Jace whispered, freezing. "Did you feel that?" "Yes," Sarai said, closing her eyes. The bond did not dissolve. "Jace, the hardware in the core was destroyed, but the neural pathway we created, it fused." Jace stared at her. He reached out with his mind, a tentative, clumsy movement like testing a sore muscle. He found her immediately. There was no wall. There was no door. She was just there, a presence in the back of his mind, a hum of anxiety and exhaustion and a fierce, protective warmth. "So," Jace said, sinking back onto the pillow, "I guess privacy is a thing of the past." "I can feel that you are terrified," Sarai murmured. "I am a little terrified," Jace admitted. "And I can feel that you are hungry. You want algae paste." "I have not eaten in 3 days," Sarai said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "And do not judge the algae paste. It is nutrient-dense." "I am judging it," Jace said. "I am judging it hard." The door slid open, and Moth walked in. The hacker looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her coat was scorched, and her cybernetic eye was twitching with the erratic tick. "Oh, look," Moth said, dropping a crate of supplies on the floor. "The Wonder Twins are awake. Stop vibrating at each other. It is making the air weird." "Where are we?" Jace asked. "We are on the horizon's edge," Moth said. "It is a transport ship commandeered by a group of reformist captains. We are currently running dark on the edge of the solar system. You two have been unconscious while the galaxy caught on fire." "The strike?" Jace asked, sitting up despite the headache. "Cancelled," Moth said. She pulled up a holographic screen. "Look." News feeds from a dozen worlds filled the air. There were riots on the Alliance capital world. There were massive protests in New York, London, and Tokyo, with humans marching alongside alien workers. They carried signs painted with the glyphs from the leaked documents. "The government didn't fall," Moth explained, "but it fractured. The hardliners are digging in, calling us terrorists. The reformists are calling us whistleblowers. And the opportunists are just trying not to get fired. You two are the most famous people in the quadrant. Half the galaxy wants to give you a medal. The other half wants to shoot you out of an airlock." "What about Thalen?" Sarai asked quietly. Moth hesitated. "He is gone. Not dead. Just gone. He vanished from the station during the chaos. Alliance intelligence says he was kidnapped by radicals. The radicals say the Alliance disappeared him to keep him quiet. Either way, he is in the wind." Sarai looked away, her grief hitting Jace like a physical blow to the chest. He felt the sharp sting of betrayal, the lingering love she still held for her mentor, and the fear that he was out there, plotting revenge. "We are safe for now," Moth said. "But we can't stay here forever. You need to recover, and you need to figure out how to be, whatever you are now." She gestured between them. "Because from where I am standing, you two aren't separate people anymore." The days that followed were a lesson in boundaries. Jace and Sarai were given a small cabin to share. It was necessary. If they moved more than 100 meters apart, the psychic strain caused debilitating migraines for both of them. They were tethered. It was intimate in a way that made physical nudity seem trivial. Jace would be brushing his teeth and suddenly feel a wave of melancholy because Sarai was remembering a sad song. Sarai would be reading a datapad and suddenly burst out laughing because Jace had remembered a particularly stupid joke from his childhood. "Get out of my head," Sarai groaned one evening, throwing a pillow at him. "I am trying to analyze these trade treaties, and you are loudly thinking about pizza." "I can't help it," Jace said, catching the pillow. "The nutrient paste tastes like wet cardboard. My brain wants cheese." "Then think about cheese quietly," Sarai said, rubbing her temples. "I don't know how to think quietly," Jace protested. "I am a loud thinker. You knew this." "I did," Sarai sighed. "I just didn't realize how pervasive it would be." She looked at him, and the annoyance in her mind dissolved into something softer, affection, warm and golden. Jace felt it wash over him, silencing his complaints. "We need a signal," Jace said, sitting on the edge of her bunk. "A do not disturb sign for the brain." "We can visualize a door," Sarai suggested. "When the door is closed, we try to dampen the projection." "Okay," Jace said. "I am visualizing a door. It is made of pizza crust." "Jace, fine. A steel door." They practiced. It was exhausting work, building mental architecture to separate their identities. But in the quiet moments, when the walls came down, the connection was breathtaking. One night, Jace woke up from a nightmare, the memory of the drones cornering him in the alley. Before he could even gasp for air, he felt Sarai's presence wrap around him. It wasn't a voice, it was a sensation of safety, a cool hand on a fevered brow. "I am here," she said. "You are safe." He looked across the dim room. She was watching him from her bunk, her eyes glowing softly in the dark. "Thank you," he whispered. "Go back to sleep," she whispered back. The romantic tension, which had been a spark before, was now a constant current. Every time they touched, the feedback loop intensified. A brush of hands was a conversation. A hug was a symphony. They were standing by the viewport one afternoon, watching the stars streak by as the ship jumped to warp. Jace reached out and took her hand. Sarai didn't pull away. She turned to him, and he felt her desire spike, a sudden, sharp longing to be held. He didn't have to guess if he could kiss her. He felt the yes before he moved. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. The kiss was different now. It wasn't the desperate collision on the balcony. It was layered. He felt the texture of his own lips through her sensory input. He felt the pounding of her heart as if it were in his own chest. He felt her vulnerability, the way she offered up her control to him, trusting him not to break her. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and the most beautiful thing Jace had ever experienced. "I could get used to this," Jace murmured against her lips. "It is intense," Sarai breathed, her hands resting on his chest. "There are no secrets, Jace. You feel how much I want this. It is embarrassing." "It is not embarrassing," Jace said, stroking the line of her jaw. "It is fair, because you can feel that I am currently wondering if I am dreaming." You are not dreaming, Sarai said, smiling. But you are still thinking about pizza a little bit. It is a complex palette of emotions, Jace defended. 2 weeks later, Moth called them to the bridge. We have a problem, Moth said. The ship is running low on fuel and we can't dock at any Alliance port. We are fugitives with a capital F. What are the options? Sarai asked. Option A, Moth said. We find a hole in the ground on some backwater moon and hide for the next 50 years. Option B, we turn ourselves in and hope the reformists have enough power to keep us from being executed. I don't like either of those, Jace said. There is an option C, Moth said, tapping a key. A holographic message appeared. It was encrypted with a seal Jace didn't recognize, a circle of hands from different species. The Interspecies Reform Council, Moth said. It is a new coalition formed in the wake of the leak. They are offering you a job. A job? Jace asked. Doing what? They want you to be advisors, Moth explained. They are drafting new treaties to ban the use of telepathy for non-consensual interrogation. They want to build safeguards against the kind of data manipulation you exposed. They need Sarai's knowledge of the system, and they need Jace's. Well, they need the human who broke the system. It means coming out of hiding, Sarai said. It means being targets. It means finishing what we started, Jace said. He looked at Sarai. He felt her hesitation, the fear of the sniper in the crowd. But underneath it, he felt a steely resolve. She didn't want to hide. She was a soldier who finally had a war worth fighting. We take the job, Sarai said. The next 6 months were a blur of travel, speeches, and danger. They traveled from world to world, protected by a security detail of reformist guards. They stood in grand halls and dusty town squares, speaking to crowds of thousands. Their relationship became a matter of public record, though the depth of their bond remained their secret. They became a symbol, the human and the Elith, the whistleblower and the defector, at a university on Centauri Prime. Jace stood at a podium, looking out at a sea of students. The thing about truth, Jace said into the microphone, is that it is inconvenient. It is messy. It ruins dinner parties. My partner here, he gestured to Sarai, who stood stoically beside him, knows exactly how messy my truth is. She has seen my browser history. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Sarai rolled her eyes, but Jace felt her amusement ripple through the bond. But we realize something, Jace continued, his voice sobering. That privacy is valuable, but secrecy is dangerous. When governments keep secrets, people die. When we hide our pain, we suffer alone. We are asking you not to tear down every wall, but to put windows in them, to see each other. Sarai stepped forward. We cannot legislate empathy, she said, her voice clear and melodic. But we can build systems that require it. We can refuse to be numbers. We can refuse to be acceptable casualties. The applause was thunderous, but the danger was always there. It happened on a rainy afternoon on the moon of Titan. They were leaving a negotiation session with the local miners' guild. The crowd was dense, a mix of supporters and protesters. Jace was waving to a group of humans when he felt it. It wasn't a sound. It was a spike of cold, malicious intent. It didn't come from his mind. It came from Sarai's blind spot. Left! Jace screamed mentally. He didn't think. He threw himself sideways, tackling Sarai just as a small medical drone buzzed out of the crowd. It wasn't carrying medicine. Its needle was dripping with a neurotoxin. The drone missed Sarai's neck by an inch, embedding itself in the heavy fabric of Jace's coat. Security guards swarmed the drone, stomping it into scrap. Jace and Sarai lay on the wet pavement, tangled together. "Jace?" Sarai gasped, her eyes wide. "Did it hit you?" "Coat," Jace wheezed, checking his shoulder. "Thick coat. I am okay." He felt her terror then. It was a tidal wave. She wasn't afraid of the assassin, she was afraid of the empty space where he would have been. They were rushed back to their safe house. The adrenaline took hours to fade. That night, in the privacy of their room, the fear finally broke. Sarai was pacing, her skin flashing with agitated colors. "We cannot keep doing this, it was too close. Next time they won't miss." "We can't stop," Jace said. He was sitting on the bed, still shaking slightly. "If we stop, Thalen wins. The silence wins." "I don't care about Thalen," Sarai cried, spinning on him. "I care about you. I felt it. Jace, I felt the needle hit your coat. I felt you die in my imagination 1,000 times in 1 second. She rushed to him, falling to her knees between his legs, grabbing his face. "I cannot lose you. I have the entire galaxy in my head, but you are the only sound I want to hear." "You aren't going to lose me," Jace said, gripping her wrists. "But Sarai, this is the deal. This is the cost. We are dangerous to them because we are together." "It is inconvenient," she whispered, tears spilling over. "This love, it is the most inconvenient thing in the universe." "Yeah," Jace smiled weakly, "but it beats being alone." He pulled her up, and they held each other. It wasn't a sexual embrace, it was a desperate clinging to life. They let the barriers down completely. Jace let her feel his fear, which was vast, but he also let her feel his absolute, unshakable certainty that she was worth it. Sarai let him feel her guilt, her protective fury, and the deep, abiding love that had grown in the cracks of her discipline. They reaffirmed the bond. They chose it again, not as a necessity of survival, but as an act of defiance. The galaxy did not change overnight, but it began to shift. On Earth, a new treaty was signed, granting humans full review power over Alliance operations in their sector. On the Alith homeworld, the High Council was forced to resign, replaced by a temporary tribunal that included dissidents. Thalen was never found. The threat of his return hung over them like a storm cloud on the horizon, a reminder that the war wasn't over. But the fear of him diminished. He was a ghost of the past. Jace and Sarai were the architects of the future. 1 year after the broadcast, they stood on the balcony of a villa on the planet Viridia. It was evening. The sky was a bruised purple, and 2 moons, one silver, one rust red, were rising over the ocean. The air smelled of salt and alien flowers. Jace leaned against the railing, watching the moons. He felt Sarai approach before he heard her. She was a warm hum in his mind, a melody of contentment. She stood beside him, resting her elbows on the rail. She was wearing simple civilian clothes, her markings glowing softly in the twilight. "Quiet tonight," Jace said. "The council is in recess," Sarai said. "Moth says the threat levels are low. We have a moment." Jace looked at her. He thought back to that cold, sterile interrogation room. He remembered the first time he saw her eyes, pools of liquid starlight that terrified him to his core. "You know," Jace said softly, "I remember thinking that was the end. I sat in that chair and thought, the alien woman looked into my eyes and knew everything. I am dead." Sarai smiled, looking out at the ocean. "And now?" "Now," Jace said, turning to face her. "I realized that knowing everything wasn't the dangerous part." "What is the dangerous part?" Sarai asked, though she already knew the answer. She could feel it blooming in his mind like a sunrise. Jace reached out and took her hand. He interlaced their fingers, skin against skin, mind against mind. "The dangerous part," Jace whispered. is loving someone this completely in a universe built on fear. It is walking around with your heart outside your chest, knowing it can be broken. Sarai squeezed his hand. She looked at him, and her eyes were not the cold void of the Inquisitor, but the warm, inviting depth of a partner. "You are right," she said. "It is reckless. It is tactical suicide. It is the most dangerous thing we have ever done." She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "And that is exactly what makes us alive." They stood there as the two moons climbed higher, casting double shadows that merged into one on the stone floor. They were not safe. The galaxy was not healed. There were still secrets in the dark and monsters in the ships above. But as Jace closed his eyes and let the hum of Sarai's mind fill the silence, he knew they would face it all. Together. The danger was just beginning. And it was perfect.